Florida lawmakers don't just want the toughest immigration laws in the nation. They want immigration laws as tough as nails. Hello, everyone. This is Attorney AMD here. In this video, we are talking about SB 782, one of the latest legislations that was introduced in the Florida's Senate on February 17th, 2025. This piece of legislation was introduced by Senator Pizzo. And before we dive into parts of what this new piece of legislation has to say, I want to share a quote from the senator. And the senator is quoted as saying, Florida Republicans have insisted that we are in an immigration crisis. We are, said Senator Pizzo. However, declaring a state of emergency, passing a few messaging bills, creating transport programs, and blowing millions of taxpayer dollars do not make us the toughest in the nation on illegal immigration. Alas, we find ourselves at the end of a third special session in 3 weeks because we just can't seem to get it right. Senator Pizzo is further quoted as saying that if we want to be serious about serious issues, then we must acknowledge the root causes of illegal immigration. The lead incentive driving illegal immigration is the opportunity of employment and the unscrupulous businesses that enable it to continue. Guys, this is a direct quote from Senator Pizzo. Seemingly, the last piece to making Florida's immigration laws tough as nails, therefore being the toughest in the nation, is to de-incentivize employers who employ undocumented immigrants in the state of Florida. I am going to share my screen. Let's take a look at some of the provisions that the bill speaks to. Now, guys, on my screen, you will see the bill that was introduced this past month, and here by Senator Pizzo, and this is SB 782. Now, I have highlighted certain sections so that I can read to you, and then we can dive further into this discussion. Now, the first section, and let me just say, this piece of legislation, it would amend different Florida statutes that are already in place. So this is a piece of legislation that is seeking to amend other sections of law that already exist on the books. And so the first section that's amended is section 20.60. I'm going to scroll down. Let's take a look at lines 63 through 65. And it says, this provision would provide, administer, and enforce the E-Verify system and employment authorization compliance as set forth in section 448.09 and 448, .095. And so if we go further down to the first section, and it reads, for an employer that violates this section, the department shall suspend or revoke all licenses issued by a licensing agency pursuant to Chapter 120 for 1 year and impose a fine not to exceed $10,000. And these fines, guys, under this piece of legislation, they must be deposited in the Florida Highway Patrol Safety Operating Trust Fund. Let's move on to line 82. An employer that subsequently, so this means a second violation, that violates this section, the department shall suspend or revoke all licenses issued by the licensing agency for 5 years and impose a fine not to exceed $50,000. And again, the fines must be deposited in the Florida Highway Patrol Safety Operating Trust. A little bit further down, for a third time violation, the department shall permanently revoke all licenses issued by a licensing agency and impose a fine not to exceed $250,000. And again, the fines will be deposited in the same Florida Highway Patrol Trust Fund. Now, here in the pink, lines 106. Now, for an employer that violates this section and an unauthorized alien employee's actions result in injuries to another person, the department shall suspend or revoke all licenses issued and for 5 years, suspend or revoke for 5 years, and impose a fine not to exceed 100,000. And further, if an employer violates this section and an unauthorized alien imposes actions resulting in the death of another person, the department shall permanently revoke all licenses. And in this instance, if a death occurs, the fine shall not exceed $500,000, and that fine, again, all fines are deposited in the FHP trust fund. Now, let's go a little bit further down because there is more. Now, back in 2023 is when Florida expanded its E-Verify for employers of a certain number of employees. And in that piece of legislation, if someone employed as an independent contractor, you were exempt. Not anymore under this proposed piece of legislation, because it says it here, for the purpose of this section, an individual who receives a Form 1099 from the Internal Revenue Service is an employee. So they are no longer exempt from this provision. Another piece of component that I want to share with you. If this proposed legislation is passed by Florida's legislature, it will go into effect July 1, 2025. Now, there's more, guys. There is actually more. And what I want to share with you, going to lines 188 through 195, if a employer failing to use the E-Verify 3 times, if an employer fails to use the E-Verify 3 times within a 24-month period, they would face a $1,000 per day fine until compliance is demonstrated. So guys, let me just scroll up a little bit more because I want to really hone in on the point of this particular legislation, and that is this piece of legislation that's making all these amendments to various sections of the Florida statutes is now being applied to all private employers. And you see how on line 149, they have struck through employer with 25 or more employees. Doesn't matter. All private employers. Doesn't matter, 25 or less, 25 or more, they have struck through that provision. And so beginning July 1, if this law goes into effect, all private employers, regardless of the number of employees that you employ, regardless of whether you employ an independent contractor, you shall, this is the language of the proposed legislation, you shall use the E-Verify system to verify a new employee's employment eligibility as required. So this is significantly larger in scope than what was passed in 2023, because in 2023, the scope of the employers applied to those with 25 or more employees, and it also did not apply to independent contractors. And guys, what this is also going to mean, and this is also as huge, and that is line 213 and 214. But let's go a little bit further up where it says that line 205, guys, cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Guys, what this means as reflected in lines 213 and 214 is that law enforcement agencies would be able to gain access through E-Verify system to investigate a detained person's immigration status. That is huge, guys. Guys, we already talked about previously, a few weeks ago, Governor DeSantis, he signed a memorandum of understanding, entering into an agreement with DHS to deputize the law enforcement officers here in the state of Florida, and they would be acting as mini ICE agents. So that piece of act, the deputization of Florida law enforcement officers being able to act as many ICE agents, they can detain, they can arrest, they can question. Coupled with now, if this piece of legislation, SB 782, goes into effect, they will now also be able to access, this is law enforcement, the E-Verify system to investigate a detained person's immigration status. Guys, as I said at the beginning of this video, Florida lawmakers, they don't want Florida's immigration laws to be tough. They want them to be tough as nails. And in this proposed piece of legislation, a few takeaways. When we last reported to you on Florida's update with finally passing a piece of legislation that the governor and lawmakers could agree upon, we talked about how $300 million had been appropriated to fund that piece of immigration bill. Now, as you can see, this new proposed legislation has several components where the fines that would be issued, it will go into the FHP Operating Trust Fund, and it will be needed because $300 million is a lot of money, and that is coming from taxpayers. So guys, as of today, there has been no movement with regards to this particular bill that's been introduced by Senator Pizzo. The last update is the date that it was filed in the Senate, which was February 17th, 2025. Of course, as things begin to progress regarding this proposed legislation, I will absolutely give you guys an update. Guys, stay tuned. Again, this video was to share with you the latest in Florida. I do thank you for watching. Please be sure, guys, to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.